I'm joined today on the Real Relationship Show by Stephanie Sims, who is a podcaster and a budget coach. And her business is called Legacy Through Motherhood. And Stephanie's got a really interesting story to tell. Now, first of all, Stephanie, welcome so much to the Real Relationship Show.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And I have to say, I'm a little bit in awe of you, first of all, because, not only have you got a really strong marriage, you're the mum to 4 little boys aged 8, 6, 4 and 2, and you have another child on the way.
Yes.
And in fact, by the time this episode goes live, it's possible you may have a 5th child, although I'm hoping that you will let me know what the sex of the child is
I will.
when this goes live, because I'm really excited for you. Amazing. I find it hard enough being the mum to one 16-year-old. How you cope with 4, soon to be 5, I have no idea. But that's a whole other podcast for a whole other day. First of all, I really want to talk to you about your relationship, because when we first started speaking, you said to me, the biggest issue you've struggled with in your marriage is competition.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain to me a bit about that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So my husband and I, we started dating when I was 16 and he was 19. And so that just kind of lends to like the teenage relationship of like, just, I don't know, it's very up and down, very just kind of not explosive and like a whatever, but there was a lot of big feelings. My husband and I are also both firstborns. And so we are just naturally like, even outside of a relationship, sports or whatever else, like we have always been just really, really driven, really competitive. And so our relationship was always like that. Like when we started dating and just all through our dating years, we fought all the time. And it wasn't even like necessarily like a normal, like it was just about everything that was little. It was always this competition of like basically just to win, you know what I mean? The argument, we literally didn't care. It was none of us were going to back down. Even once we figured out we were wrong or right or whatever, it was like we were just trying to save face at that point. And, we got married, and I think in your like teenage mind, you kind of think that things are going to be fixed once you get married. And we got married pretty young. I had just turned 21. I think he was 24 or something. And it didn't just end. It continued. And I remember like I had my sister-in-law who they were at that point, or a couple years after we got married, they were like, engaged after they had dated for a while, and they were like, I don't know that we've ever had an argument. I don't know that we've ever fought. And I'm like, me and my husband looked at each other like, if we know how to do one thing, it is a fight, because it is, and it's always bound with like, there's just some kind of competition going on between us just in general. So that was kind of our biggest thing. And really when it woke us up is when we started to see the competition among our boys start to happen. Like we had kind of built this culture of competition. And so that's when we really started to kind of change what we were doing just in general.
Absolutely. And it's something I work with my clients a lot, is that acknowledging that we are modeling to our children how to have healthy relationships.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And when children see mum and dad doing something, they don't question whether it's healthy or not. They just think, that's how we have relationships, and copy us. That's how we learn to have relationships. It's how they learn. So I was going to ask you about that competition with the children. And how did that present itself then? What was it? Was there a specific defining moment where you thought, we've got to change things? Or was it a gradual build up?
I mean, I think both. I think that so I come from like my whole business is Legacy Through Motherhood. It's about generational change. It's about changing your kind of familial narrative. And I grew up all around divorce, like all around it. And so I am like hellbent on not having that happen, but not just having a marriage, but having a good one. And, just arguing and fighting and like always trying to get one leg up, like isn't a great, or I can't even say it was unhealthy, because we really were happy. It was just like, it was just constant. Now we like barely fight. But what kind of was happening was even the language that we were using around our children. So like, because we're competitive, we'd be like, all right, the first one to buckle in their car seat wins, right? Well, what does that lend to? That lends to them pushing each other out of the way, like, or whatever it might be. And, or it's like first one to get in bed wins. And then they're pushing each other down the hallway, trying to trip each other, like whatever. Right. And so even our language, which I think competition is healthy and it's good, but I realized that it was like competition within our home, that's not good or healthy. Competition out in the world is healthy, and we want to raise competitive, driven boys. But then I don't even know if there was necessarily a situation that happened specifically. It was just I started realizing that we are like creating this culture of competition, and so that's, I don't know, just the language my husband and I were using, we're cultivating that like negative response within our boys. And, there's already sibling rivalry. Being the firstborn, we're both like the angel children, like our younger siblings are like, you guys are perfect. You guys are whatever, which is not true. But anyways, so I just didn't like that. And so we actually started to switch like our language around our kids, and we stopped saying, okay, first one to do X, Y, or Z, because there's 4 of them. So only one is going to win, which means everyone else didn't, which caused issue. And so the language we started to change ourselves to was that we were the Sims team. And literally we'll get letters in the mail for like to the Sims team, like for birthdays or whatever. Like it sounds kind of cheesy, but we literally will have like team huddles or whatever. And we'll say, okay, like once everyone is in bed, like Sims, like we win basically. And so now, I mean, that's kind of a oversimplified version of it. But now I have my 8-year-old helping my 2-year-old get buckled. I have him helping put toothpaste on his brother's toothbrush before bed. So like changing the language of like, hey, once we all get in bed, then we all win, instead of it being this competition, has really been helpful.
And that's so important, isn't it? And I have so many conversations about the language we use. And one of my sort of biggest missions, if you like, is to start to help people respect each other within relationships. And that comes from the language we use towards each other. Because if we use an inflammatory or aggressive or derogatory language towards each other, what are we going to get back? We're going to get the same back. And then we're going to start modeling that to younger generations. And we're going to create generation upon generation of behavior like that. So
right.
I'm totally with you about the use of language. And how did the boys respond to that? Did they notice the difference? Or...
I think so. I think that just even us, I mean, and it was a super easy fix. Like it was not this, and listen, they're 4 brothers, like they still compete. Like let's not act like they're all helping each other all the time. But it was a very simple ask. Like it was not this, hey, once we're all in bed, we all win or whatever. Or, it used to be like, literally we would say things, which is so bad, but we would be like, okay, whoever like gets in bed first gets, some prize or something. Like, I don't know. It was just like a dumb thing to say. Not dumb, but just that's what we would say. And then we really wouldn't even have a prize. It would be like a high five anyways. And so once we switched, it really was, they just followed suit. Right. And I feel like so often, I don't know. So often our kids will just do that. It doesn't have to be this big revamp. It doesn't have to be this huge whatever. It was literally one night we switched. My husband and I, he's amazing. And he literally, I'm the one that kind of really digs into like parenting, different strategies and whatever else. And he'll just be on board. And so, he just started to switch his language and just say, hey boys, like first, like, you're not the first one. Once we all get in bed, like I'm going to come and give everybody a hug. So we all have to be in bed, which means the slowest one, right, is going to need the help. My 2-year-old is going to need the help. And so now his brothers will help him so they all can get there together. And I'm telling you, it was like a one-night switch. Like it was not this big drawn out thing. It was just switching of the requests. And so oftentimes we will, and like I said, even the language, like we'll call ourselves the Sims team, which again sounds so like whatever, but the boys really love it, And so I don't know, it's just been really helpful.
That's brilliant though, isn't it? It makes them feel included. It's such an inclusive image that it conjures up as well. And very often you said it was such an easy switch to make, such a simple switch. But I find so often it's the simplest of things that can make the biggest difference. And very often we try to overcomplicate things Whereas all we need to do is go right back to basics and say, okay, what tweaks can we make here? And I'm interested to know, what impact has that had on you and your husband and your competitive natures?
Yep. I think that again, we used to just fight all the time. And I say fight, and I just mean like kind of bicker all the time. And we barely do now. And I mean, like, legitimately, we barely even argue. Because I've realized you don't have to die on every hill. He's realized, like, he doesn't have to say everything that he is thinking, and neither do I. And so I think there's a responsibility and a burden, not necessarily in a bad way, but a burden when you have kids that, like, they're starting to listen, they're not one anymore. Like, they're starting to listen, and the way that we are talking to each other matters, right? It's not just 17-year-olds like going off on each other anymore. It's like, this is what they're going to expect later on in a relationship that they get into. And so, like you were saying, just that respectful communication. And this is again going to sound cheesy, but it is literally something that we talk about all the time. This competition has switched from who does more or who deserves this or, whatever, works harder, that kind of thing, to out loving, out giving, and out serving one another. Like, that's how we compete in this family. And that sounds like everything is perfect and great, and it's not. But for us, that's kind of the value shift or the culture shift that we have changed from everyone's like there for themselves, my husband and myself included, and then our 4 boys. It's like, you got to get first or you're last kind of thing, to this, like, we just outserve, outgive, outlove. And that's what we attempt to try to do. And I would say that, again, just by the language, like, it's literally the changing of the language that has really helped with that.
That's wonderful. I love to hear when such really a simple technique, a basic technique like that has such a massive shift. It's just so heartwarming to hear that. It's fantastic. Now, I'm really interested, Stephanie, at the top of this and in the information you sent me, you said that on your podcast, you talk about 5 different topics. And in those topics, you're really focused on generational change. And that's a topic that I work with quite a lot with my clients, because I find we live in the confines of what is expected of us within relationships based upon the upbringing that we had by our parents and the upbringing that they had and their parents, and so on and so forth. So very much of our lives today are still lived based on Victorian values, which just aren't relevant. And I'm interested to know that, you talk on 5 different topics. You talk on faith, on finances, on health, on marriage, and on mindset. And how you talk about being just 1% better in each of those areas every day has such a significant impact. Again, we're talking about simple measures.
Oh, yeah.
Making big, big changes. And I love that this goes through your entire life, your business, your home life. It's brilliant. And I'm really grateful to you, because I didn't ask you to send these through, but you've sent through such wonderful free resources to share with our listeners, with our viewers. And you've got a workbook here called United Front. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So yes, there's a workbook there, and there's also an episode that kind of goes along with it. It's called Becoming a United Front in Marriage When You Don't Always Agree. And basically that is kind of putting away any any preference that you might have, personally, in order to make your marriage the strongest, right? And the same thing goes with parenting, that parenting's kind of linked in there. So it's like putting aside personal preference to make sure that you are parenting your kids the way they need to be parented. And so that workbook and episode that goes kind of along with it really is this like framework that my husband and I have figured out. And I think it's really powerful, because if you know our story and you understand like how competitive and how much we used to fight and whatever else, like literally we joke about how much we know how to fight, to where we are now, it is exactly what you said. It's like the simple, seemingly insignificant things that you can just do day in and day out. Because listen, I don't need anyone revamping their marriage overnight or their finances overnight or whatever it is. Like, it is truly just the small things. But the small things that are easy to do are also easy not to do, right? That's a Jim Rohn quote. And so it's just this framework, that free worksheet that I gave, or free workbook that I gave you guys. It is really just this framework, the 7-step framework my husband and I kind of work through if we disagree on a big topic in our marriage, and how to come to an agreement just in general.
Absolutely wonderful. And you're talking about the small things. It's easy to do the small things or not to do the small things.
Right.
And one of the things that I like to share with my clients, say thank you. Say thank you to your partner for bringing you a cup of tea or coffee when you haven't asked for one. Say thank you to them for clearing the kitchen worktop. Say thank you to them for helping you with the kids. And initially they're going to think, that's a bit weird. Why are they thanking me for just helping out? But when you've thanked them a number of times over for it, it just becomes normal, and they feel valued and they feel loved, and they want to do it all the more.
Yes.
And also what happens then is they start thanking you back, because you've exhibited the behaviour. And it's such a simple change. Stephanie, I feel I could talk to you around so many subjects for hours and hours and hours, but we don't have hours and hours and hours today. Can you please tell our listeners and our viewers where they can find out more about you and how to get in touch with you?
Sure. So my podcast is Legacy Through Motherhood, like you said. I'm on Instagram at Legacy Through Motherhood. And then my website is Sims Arrows, SIMS arrows.com.
Fantastic. And you also work on finances as well, don't you?
I do. My husband and I have a very powerful story of our finances, of being like zero net worth. We had a ton of debt 5 years ago to now we have no debt, and we have almost $750,000 in net worth. And so I learned how to budget like crazy. We downsized a ton with our home and our cars. And now I just kind of step alongside other women to just really help them figure out how to budget, how to manage their money. I do a ton of money mindset work. And so that's really where like I step into just in general in my business to help other women, kind of one-on-one coaching and other avenues as well.
Fantastic. And I know from my own experience of working with the people I work with that finances is such a bone of contention in so many relationships, and quite often can destroy relationships. So congratulations to you for working through those issues and coming out of it, really in a really healthy position. That's fantastic. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for giving of your time, for giving your time to us when you've got 4 little boys there who I'm sure want some time with their mum, given that I know you've only just come back from vacation last night as well. So I really do appreciate how valuable your time is, and you've given your time to us today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for letting me come on.